Darkness enveloped Vela Gulf on the night of August 6, 1943. Aboard the USS Dunlap, radar screens flickered with green phosphorescence as operators monitored the surrounding waters. At precisely 2,333 hours, four distinct contacts appeared on the SG radar display, 29,500 yards distant, bearing 312 degrees. Commander Frederick Moosbrugger, leading Task Group 31.2 from Dunlap's command bridge, had anticipated this moment. 17 minutes from now, 3 enemy warships would lie at the bottom of the Pacific, victims of a revolution in naval combat they never saw coming. The Japanese convoy consisted of 4 destroyers transporting 900 troops to reinforce Vela on Kalambangar Island. Captain Kaji Sugiura directed operations from the destroyer Hajikes, accompanied by Arisher and Kawakaze, both vessels packed with soldiers, plus Shigeru serving as escort without troops aboard. Sugiura had successfully navigated this exact passage through Vela Gulf on 3 prior occasions. During mission planning, Commander Hara of Shigeru had voiced concerns about route repetition, warning it invited catastrophe. Sugiura dismissed these objections. The Tokyo Express resupply missions had operated successfully for months, and Japanese commanders maintained confidence in their legendary night fighting prowess. Moosbrugger commanded 6 American destroyers organized into 2 divisions. Division A1 comprised Dunlap, Craven, and Maury, each carrying complete torpedo complements. Division A2 included Lang, Starrett, and Stack, vessels with reduced torpedo capacity but enhanced anti-aircraft armament. Every ship mounted SG surface search radar systems. This marked a historic moment. For the first time in the Pacific theater, American destroyers would engage independently, without cruiser support. The decision represented a fundamental transformation in naval strategy. American forces had suffered devastating losses in nearly every nocturnal surface engagement throughout the Solomons campaign from August 1942 through July 1943. The catastrophic defeat at Savo Island on August 9, 1942, exemplified these failures. 4 Allied cruisers went down in just 37 minutes. USS Storia lost 219 crewmen. USS Quincy counted 370 dead. USS Vincennes suffered 322 casualties. HMAS Canberra added 84 Australian sailors to the toll. Japanese forces achieved total surprise despite American vessels carrying SC air search radar. The radar returns proved confusing amid the surrounding landmasses. Guadalcanal, Savo Island, and Florida Island created a labyrinth of echoes on the scopes. SC radar operated at 1.5-meter wavelength, capable of detecting large vessels at 20,000 yards, yet resolution remained inadequate. Near islands, operators couldn't differentiate between ships and terrain. Everything appeared as indistinct blips on the display. Visual confirmation became mandatory before opening fire. By the time American lookouts spotted Japanese vessels, torpedoes were already streaking through the water. This pattern repeated through multiple battles. Cape Esperance in October 1942, First Guadalcanal in November 1942, Tassafaronga in November 1942, Kalambangar in July 1943. American ships possessed radar technology, but radar alone couldn't secure victories. The equipment existed. The tactical doctrine to exploit it effectively did not. The SG radar transformed everything. Developed in 1941 by MIT's Radiation Laboratory utilizing British cavity magnetron technology, the SG operated at 10-centimeter wavelength, microwave frequency. This shorter wavelength delivered dramatically superior resolution compared to SC radar. The SG could distinguish ships from islands. It presented contacts on a planned position indicator, a circular scope displaying range and bearing simultaneously. Operators could monitor multiple targets while their vessel maneuvered. USS Augusta received the first operational SG radar installation in April 1942. Production accelerated gradually. By August 1943, most American destroyers in the South Pacific had SG systems installed, though possessing radar and using it effectively remained separate challenges. American naval doctrine in early 1943 still prioritized cruiser-led formations for night engagements. Destroyers functioned as escorts while cruisers provided firepower. Visual targeting determined firing decisions. Radar offered warning, but the ultimate engagement decision required visual enemy confirmation. Japanese forces exploited this hesitation repeatedly. Their lookouts trained extensively for night operations, spotting ships at ranges where American lookouts saw nothing. Japanese torpedoes possessed twice the range of American weapons. The Type 93 Long Lance could reach 40,000 yards, while American Mark 15 torpedoes managed only 15,000 yards. Japanese forces could fire first, withdraw before American response, and escape into darkness. Commodore Arleigh Burke had analyzed these defeats and formulated new destroyer tactics. Burke commanded Destroyer Squadron 23, known as the Little Beavers. He emphasized aggressive radar employment for offensive operations. Use radar to detect enemies first, close to torpedo range undetected. Launch torpedoes silently. Use radar to guide attacks, and only open gunfire after torpedoes were running toward targets. Burke's concepts challenged conventional naval doctrine, and many senior officers resisted. They lacked sufficient confidence in radar to base attacks solely on electronic contacts. Yet Burke's results spoke for themselves. His destroyer squadron achieved multiple victories using radar-guided tactics. Rear Admiral Theodore Wilkinson, commanding amphibious forces in the South Pacific, recognized the effectiveness of Burke's approach. When intelligence revealed another Tokyo Express run scheduled for August 6 to Vela, Wilkinson assigned the intercept mission to a pure destroyer force, no cruisers involved. Moosbrugger would command the operation. Moosbrugger had served under Burke and thoroughly understood the innovative tactics. More significantly, Wilkinson granted Moosbrugger authority to disregard standard tactical recommendations. Wilkinson's staff advised Moosbrugger to avoid torpedo attacks and depend on long-range gunfire instead. Moosbrugger expressed confidence in his destroyer's ability to employ their primary weapon, torpedoes guided by radar. On the morning of August 6th, Moosbrugger's task group departed Purvis Bay near Guadalcanal. The 6 destroyers sailed independently. No cruisers, no battleships, just destroyers equipped with radar and torpedoes. Moosbrugger convened a conference with all 6 destroyer captains before departure, reviewing the battle plan thoroughly. Division A1 would locate enemies with radar and execute a silent torpedo attack. Division A2 would position to cross the Japanese line and deliver gunfire support after torpedo impacts. Radio silence except for essential tactical communications. No searchlights, no gun flashes until torpedoes were running. Use islands as background to screen American movements. Trust the radar. Lieutenant Commander Clifton Iverson commanded Dunlap. Lieutenant Commander Frank Gould commanded Sterrett. Both would later receive Navy Crosses for their actions that night. The planning conference emphasized that success depended on flawless radar operation and precise execution. Every ship needed to track identical targets and calculate matching firing solutions. The combat information centers aboard each destroyer would coordinate the attack. The CIC represented a relatively new concept, a dedicated space where radar operators, plotters, and communicators collaborated to process tactical information. Most destroyers in 1943 had CICs that were cramped afterthoughts, spaces carved from existing compartments during refits, but they functioned effectively. That evening, the task group entered Vela Gulf from Kula Gulf to the south. The night was dark, overcast skies, no moon, visibility under 1,000 yards. Perfect conditions for radar, terrible conditions for visual lookouts. Moosbrugger's force formed 2 columns 500 yards apart, Division A1 to port, Division A2 to starboard. At 2,300 hours, both divisions turned north and accelerated to 25 knots. The SG radars aboard all 6 ships swept continuously. Kolombangara Island displayed clearly on the scopes to the east, Vela La Vela Island to the west. The gulf between them appeared empty. At 23:33, Dunlap's SG radar detected 4 contacts bearing 312 degrees, range 29,500 yards, almost due north. Craven confirmed the contact seconds later, then Mori. The Japanese destroyers appeared exactly where intelligence predicted, for ships in column formation heading south at approximately 30 knots, closing range. Moosbrugger ordered Division A1 to prepare for torpedo attack. Division A2 began maneuvering to cross the Japanese formation. All ships maintained radio silence. The CICs tracked targets continuously. Range decreased, 27,000 yards, 25,000, 20,000. The Japanese showed no indication of detecting American ships. Their radar, if operational, wasn't detecting Moosbrugger's destroyers. Kolombangara Island's mountainous bulk might be screening the American formation, or Japanese radar was simply inferior to American SG systems. At 15,000 yards, Moosbrugger ordered his division to close to torpedo range. The 3 destroyers accelerated to 30 knots. The target solution updated continuously. Enemy speed 30 knots, course 180 degrees, range decreasing, 10,000 yards, 9,000, 8,000. At 23:41, range reached 7,500 yards. Moosbrugger ordered torpedo launch. Dunlap fired 8 Mark 15 torpedoes. Craven fired 8. Mori fired 8. 24 torpedoes entered the water in 63 seconds. All 3 destroyers immediately turned hard to starboard and increased to flank speed, using Kolombangara Island's dark coastline as a screen while withdrawing at maximum speed. The torpedoes ran toward the Japanese formation at 46 knots. Estimated time to impact, approximately 4 minutes. Division A2 had positioned to starboard of the Japanese formation. Lang, Starrett, and Stack held fire, waiting. The torpedo tracks remained invisible to everyone except the CIC plotters, who calculated impact times based on launch data. At 23:46, the torpedoes struck home. Multiple explosions erupted across the Japanese formation. Hajikes, Erasure, and Kawakaze were hit simultaneously. Fires erupted across all 3 destroyers, followed by secondary explosions as magazines detonated. Division A2 immediately opened fire, concentrating 5-inch guns from 3 destroyers on the burning Japanese ships. Muzzle flashes illuminated the Gulf. Now the Japanese could finally see their attackers, but the moment had passed. Kawakaze had taken a magazine hit. She rolled over and disappeared beneath the waves within minutes. Hajikes and Erasure burned fiercely, dead in the water. Shigure, the 4th Japanese destroyer, had escaped the torpedo barrage. Commander Hara witnessed his 3 companions explode. He saw no American ships until Division A2 opened fire. The gun flashes revealed American positions, but Hara's lookouts had detected nothing before that moment. Hara fired 8 torpedoes toward the American destroyers. All missed. He ordered full speed and withdrew to the northwest. Moosbrugger's 6 destroyers reformed and swept the area. By midnight, Hajikes and Erasure had both sunk. Shigure had escaped, fleeing north. The engagement from initial radar contact to final sinkings had lasted 26 minutes. American casualties. 1 sailor suffered a crushed hand in a non-combat accident during the battle. No American ships were hit. No American ships sustained damage. 3 Japanese destroyers sunk. 685 Japanese soldiers lost, most by drowning. 525 Japanese sailors killed. Total Japanese casualties, approximately 1,210 men. This lopsided victory was unprecedented. American destroyers had never achieved such complete success in a night engagement. Moosbrugger's after-action report emphasized SG radar's role. He wrote that the new SG radar made the operation success possible, noting that radar allowed the American force to track the enemy from extreme range, position for optimal attack, and launch torpedoes before the Japanese realized they were present. The report also praised the combat information centers aboard each destroyer for processing radar data and coordinating the attack. However, Moosbrugger couldn't fully explain why the Japanese hadn't detected his ships. Surely Japanese radar should have provided some warning. What nobody on the American side knew: none of the 4 Japanese destroyers at Vela Gulf carried operational radar. Japanese destroyer radar in 1943 remained primitive. Most Japanese destroyers lacked radar installations entirely. Those that did carried Type 22 surface search sets operating at 10 centimeters like American SG radar, but with far less capable displays and processing. More critically, Japanese doctrine didn't emphasize radar use. Even when radar detected contacts, Japanese commanders waited for visual confirmation before acting. Japanese training emphasized superior night optics. Their lookouts genuinely exceeded American lookouts at visual detection. But lookouts cannot see through darkness at 30,000 yards. Radar could. Commander Hara filed his after-action report upon returning to Rabaul. He described the engagement as an ambush by unknown forces, reporting that his destroyers came under torpedo attack without warning. His lookouts saw nothing until American ships opened gunfire. Hara speculated that submarines might have been involved, or aircraft, or possibly coastal defense installations on Kolombangara. The possibility that 6 American destroyers had used radar to track his force from beyond visual range, calculate a perfect firing solution, and launch torpedoes silently didn't appear in his report. The concept existed outside the framework of how Japanese commanders understood night surface combat. Japanese naval intelligence analyzed reports from Vela Gulf and other recent engagements. A pattern emerged. American forces were achieving surprise more frequently, American torpedo attacks were more accurate, and Japanese lookouts reported that American ships seemed to know Japanese positions before visual contact. The logical conclusion was that American radar had improved dramatically. Japanese intelligence had examined captured American radar equipment and knew Americans possessed microwave radar similar to Japanese systems. If both sides had comparable technology, why were Americans suddenly winning? What Japanese intelligence failed to understand was doctrine. Technology alone didn't determine outcomes. How the technology was used mattered more. Japanese commanders used radar as a supplement to visual lookouts. Americans were learning to use radar as the primary detection and targeting system, with visual confirmation secondary. This doctrinal shift, more than any technical advantage, explained American success. Within days of Vela Gulf, Moosbrugger's tactics spread through the Pacific Fleet. Rear Admiral Wilkinson distributed the action report to every destroyer squadron commander. The message was clear: SG radar worked, radar-guided torpedo attacks worked, and independent destroyer operations worked. Other commanders began implementing similar tactics. On August 17, 1943, destroyers using radar-guided attacks sank 2 more Japanese destroyers near Bougainville. On September 6, another engagement resulted in 3 Japanese destroyers sunk with 0 American losses. The pattern continued. American destroyers with SG radar were winning night battles decisively. The kill ratio reversed completely. Before Vela Gulf, American forces typically lost 2 ships for every Japanese ship destroyed in night actions. After Vela Gulf, Americans were destroying 2 or 3 Japanese ships for every American loss. In many engagements, American forces took no losses whatsoever. Japanese Naval Command recognized the shift. By late September 1943, Japanese doctrine changed. Destroyers were ordered to avoid night engagements with American forces unless they held significant numerical superiority. The Tokyo Express supply runs to Guadalcanal and the Central Solomons became increasingly rare. When they did occur, Japanese forces used submarines and small craft instead of destroyers. The American destroyer force, once considered inferior to Japanese night fighting capability, had become the dominant force in nocturnal surface combat. Radar technology remained classified throughout the war. The Navy's Public Information Office never explained how American destroyers achieved their victories. Official press releases attributed success to superior tactics, improved training, and better torpedoes. All those factors were accurate. American torpedoes had been terrible in 1942, magnetic exploders failed, depth settings were wrong, and many torpedoes ran beneath targets without exploding. By July 1943, most of these problems were resolved. American destroyers also had better training. By mid-1943, officers like Burke and Moosbrugger understood night surface tactics better than their predecessors. But none of these improvements would have mattered without radar. SG radar provided the information necessary to execute the tactics. Radar operators in the combat information centers processed that information and provided targeting data to the bridge. The technology enabled everything else. Yet the radar operators remained anonymous. No names in action reports, no commendations for individual radar men. The technology was classified. Discussing SG radar capabilities outside cleared personnel was prohibited. Even after the war, when radar became common knowledge, the specific contributions of individual operators weren't documented. Official histories credited commanders. Moosbrugger received the Navy Cross for Vela Gulf. Iverson and Gould received Navy Crosses. The captains and admirals got recognition. The enlisted men who operated the radar equipment that made the victory possible got nothing. Moosbrugger himself recognized this imbalance. After the war, when he became a rear admiral and later a vice admiral, he made a point of telling junior officers about the importance of enlisted technical specialists. He told them that mechanics, radar men, and technicians often understood their equipment better than officers did. He emphasized that good commanders listened to their enlisted experts. Moosbrugger specifically mentioned Vela Gulf in these talks. He said the victory was possible because radar operators performed their jobs perfectly under intense pressure. He said combat information center crews processed information faster than anyone thought possible. He said torpedo crews executed flawless launches based on radar data they had never used operationally before. But he couldn't name individuals. The men who actually operated the equipment, who maintained it, who made it work when it mattered most, remained anonymous. Moosbrugger continued in destroyer command through 1944. He led Destroyer Division 12 through the Philippines campaign. His destroyers participated in the Battle of Vela Gulf in October 1944, the largest naval battle in history. American forces at Leyte used the same radar-guided tactics Moosbrugger had pioneered at Vela Gulf. The results were devastating for the Japanese. American destroyers sank multiple Japanese cruisers and destroyers in night actions. The Imperial Japanese Navy lost effective control of the Philippines. By early 1945, Japanese surface forces avoided night engagements entirely. American destroyer forces dominated the night. After the war, Moosbrugger was promoted steadily. Commodore in 1945, captain commanding positions through the late 1940s, rear admiral in 1951. He commanded Military Sea Transportation Service, Pacific, from 1952 to 1955. A critical logistics role during the Korean War. He retired as a vice admiral in 1956 and died on October 1, 1974, at age 73. USS Moosbrugger, a Spruance-class destroyer, was commissioned in 1978 and named in his honor. Commander Hara survived the war. Shiger, the destroyer he commanded at Vela Gulf, survived until January 1945 when she was sunk by the submarine USS Blackfin in the Gulf of Siam. Hara transferred to other commands and witnessed the steady decline of Japanese naval power. After the war, Hara wrote a memoir titled Japanese Destroyer Captain, published in 1958. In it, he described Vela Gulf as a perfect American victory. Hara acknowledged that American radar superiority had been decisive. He noted that Japanese forces had no counter to radar-guided attacks. Hara specifically mentioned that Japanese lookouts, despite their superior training, couldn't compete with electronic detection. He died in 1980. Captain Kaju Sugiura, who commanded the Japanese force at Vela Gulf, survived Hajake's sinking. He was rescued and returned to Rabaul, emaciated and in disgrace. He was later appointed captain of the heavy cruiser Haguro. He was killed when Haguro was sunk by British destroyers off Malaya in May 1945. The Royal Navy destroyers used radar to track Haguro in darkness and launched torpedoes from beyond visual range. The same tactics that destroyed Sugiura's destroyers at Vela Gulf destroyed his cruiser 22 months later. The SG radar remained in service aboard American destroyers through the war's end. Approximately 1,000 SG units were produced during the war years. The system proved reliable under combat conditions. Operators learned to trust the displays. Commanders learned to base tactical decisions on radar information. By 1945, American naval doctrine had completely incorporated radar as the primary detection and targeting system for surface combat. Visual lookouts remained important, but they were secondary to electronic detection. After the war, radar technology advanced rapidly. The SG radar became obsolete by the 1950s. Newer systems with better resolution, longer range, and more sophisticated displays replaced it. The SG systems were removed from ships and either scrapped or sent to training facilities. Few examples survived. The National Museum of the United States Navy has some SG components in storage, but no complete system is on public display. The combat information centers, where radar operators worked, were torn out during ship modernizations or destroyed when ships were scrapped. USS Dunlap, Moosbrugger's flagship at Vela Gulf, survived the war. She participated in operations through 1945, including Iwo Jima and Okinawa. She was decommissioned in January 1946 and sold for scrap in 1947. Her SG radar was removed during decommissioning. No museum requested it. The equipment was either destroyed or sent to a training facility where it was eventually discarded. Nothing physical remains from the destroyer that made first radar contact at Vela Gulf. At the Naval History and Heritage Command in Washington, there is a small exhibit about the Battle of Vela Gulf. It includes a photograph showing 6 destroyers in column formation. The caption identifies them as Moosbrugger's task group. It mentions the battle as the first successful independent destroyer action in the Pacific Campaign. It notes that the engagement marked a turning point in night surface warfare. It doesn't mention SG radar. It doesn't mention the combat information centers. It doesn't mention the radar operators who detected the Japanese force at 29,500 yards and tracked them to torpedo range. Their contribution remains invisible. This is how technological change occurs in warfare, not through deliberate programs or high-level decisions alone, but through the intersection of new tools, new doctrine, and individuals willing to trust unfamiliar technology. The SG radar existed in 1942. It took until August 1943 for commanders to trust it enough to base attacks on radar contacts alone. That trust came from officers like Moosbrugger, who understood that the old doctrine was killing American sailors. It came from radar operators who maintained their equipment perfectly and provided accurate information under combat stress. It came from enlisted men whose names were never recorded, but whose work changed the course of the Pacific War. The Battle of Vela Gulf demonstrated that radar-guided night attacks could achieve decisive results with minimal American casualties. That lesson spread rapidly. Within months, every American destroyer commander in the Pacific understood the new tactics. Within a year, Japanese surface forces had effectively ceded control of the night to American radar-equipped ships. The technological advantage that Japanese forces had held since 1941 disappeared. The innovation didn't come from a laboratory or a planning conference. It came from putting the right technology in the hands of skilled operators and trusting them to use it. The unnamed radar men who stared at green screens in darkened combat information centers, tracking contacts through the night, made this victory possible. Their story deserves to be remembered alongside the commanders who received medals and the ships that bore famous names. Technology alone never wins wars. People win wars. People who understand how to use technology. People who maintain it. People who trust it when their lives depend on it. The Battle of Vela Gulf proved that lesson in the most dramatic way possible. On a dark night in August 1943, 6 American destroyers used electronic eyes to see what human eyes could not, and in doing so, changed naval warfare forever. Each story from the Second World War matters. Each one deserves to be told and remembered, not just the famous battles and celebrated heroes, but also the technical specialists, the radar operators, the anonymous sailors who made victory possible through their skill and dedication.